Welcome to the WriterDojo with your hosts, Steve Diamond.
Yellow.
And Larry Correia.
Tashi Dalek.
Today's episode, How to Tell a Story in 5,000 Words.
Ooh. Which one's that one from, Larry?
Tibetan. I'm basically going down all the places that have been victimized by terrible people.
All right. Sweet.
And this podcast is now banned. and I got fired from the NBA.
Spotify's about to Joe Rogan us.
They give us $100 million first, then Joe Rogan us.
I know, I'll take that. All right. So our last several episodes, we've been talking about conventions and we had the mandatory diversity panel, but we want to get back to something kind of fun and very nuts and boltsy. Okay. We got a question. Now, neither, I don't think he is, and producer Jack isn't sure that he is. Trent, he had a question for us. He sent it in. Now, Trent, usually we reserve Q&A type things for people who are supporters. Trent, it's not too late. You can still do it. I got faith in you, buddy. I got you. You can do it. Because, for just 99 cents a month, you can help me and Larry become warlords of Northern Utah. One day we'll get there.
Sounds like a plan.
These guns ain't going to buy themselves, everyone.
No, guns are expensive.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And more importantly, the ammo.
For each backer, we can get like one round of 5.56.
Oh, I know. Oh, we need more backers, Larry.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, all right, Trent. Here's this. It's kind of a comment with some question in it. The gist of it is, his wife asked him what he wanted to do, and he said, "Well, I want to write a novel," and so he did. He wrote. He says he wrote a 100,000 word novel, followed up with a 107,000 word novel, then another 80,000 word one, and he's working on his fourth book.
Good.
First of all, right on, dude. High five.
Bravo. Well done.
Good job. Good freaking job. He wants to go the traditional route. So he's been he's doing the query letters and the samples and stuff like that.
Respect.
Good job. And he says, I've heard you guys talk so much about short stories that it makes me want to write one. The idea is so foreign to me, having put so many words to the page. I am wondering if you have any advice for how to tell a good story in as little as 5,000 words.
That's an excellent question.
Great question. First of all, I love where his head's at. Because the dude's actually putting in work.
He's putting in work. I
mean,
if you've done close to 400,000 words.
Yeah, he's getting right there.
I mean, there's the old thing about, it takes 1 million words to really, but whatever. I didn't write it. Unless you count blog posts and angry tweets.
Oh, you're in the trillions at least. Especially just with angry tweets.
140 characters at a time.
I know.
That's a good question, though, because writing a novel is a very different process than writing a short story. We've talked about short versus long, but that was more kind of business. But in this case, this is a really good question, because if you start out writing novels first and you wrote 100,000, 120,000 word, 80,000 words.
5,000 seems like so little.
Yeah. To tell a story.
That's like 2 chapters.
Because if you have 100,000 words, you can develop a lot of story. You can get a lot of points, a lot of characters, a lot of really intricate stuff into 100,000 words.
Yeah.
5,000 words in comparison, seems really small.
Now, he says in as little as 5,000 words.
Well, we can use that as our cutoff for this.
But I would actually say like the advice that we're going to kind of go through here and some of our recommendations, it's not like it stops at 5,000, and below 5,000, it's like the wastelands.
I've sold flash fiction.
Yeah.
So I've done 500 word short stories. 500
word to 1,500 word is generally flash fiction. Okay. One of my very first pro short stories was the one for the Bane Big Book of Monsters. Remember that anthology?
Yes.
Remember that one?
With the giant monster and the samurai.
Yep, that's right. Now, the story behind that one is I'd initially sold that to another publisher, and they were doing one of the big Kickstarter anthologies like you see all the time these days, which are awesome and great. I love that. But they forgot about me in the shuffle of getting everything squared away. And so I had the story done. Like, it was done.
Yep.
And
Now you didn't have an
and now I
anthology
didn't
to
have an
be in
anthology
anymore.
for it.
Yep.
And I was like, well, crap, this is going to pay me like 6 or 7 cents a word. I was bummed. And it was a professional cred. And at that point, like there comes a point in your young careers when like the professional cred is everything.
Yeah, it's more important than the money even.
Yeah.
Which is weird for me to say as a devout capitalist.
Yeah. I mean, you need it. You need that. You need that cred. And that professional cred is measured in terms of money.
Yep.
So I was like, well, shoot. So I remember coming to you one day and I was like, Larry, I'm bummed out. I wrote this really cool story and now no one's going to read it because the anthology, they spaced that I was supposed to be involved. And you're like, oh, well, Bain happens to be doing one too. This was right when like Pacific Rim and the first new Godzilla movie were coming out. So giant monsters and giant robots were a big thing.
Yeah, they were hot.
They still are. I love
I
that
know.
crap.
I'm a sucker. I wrote Gunrunner.
Heck yeah. So, you're like, yeah, well, Bain's doing one. Like, I don't know if there's room, but I can introduce you to the editor, Hank.
Yeah, it's Hank Davis.
Yeah, Hank Davis, great guy. So, so you introduced me, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I sent over the story. But here's what I did, because I was worried, because from what you had told me and what Hank had told me, the anthology was basically full. And it was a weird anthology. I didn't realize this until I submitted that it was, a lot of it was reprint stories, guys like
Classics.
like Arthur C. Clarke and Lovecraft and stuff like that. I think did Robert E. Howard have one in that one? I don't remember.
Can't remember.
I know.
It's been too long.
Anyway, great, like giants of literature were in this thing. And there's like, and there's like room for like 5 or 6 maybe new stories. And so here's what I did. I thought, ooh, okay. What can I do? Okay. One, obviously I need to tell a really compelling story. So I wrote my story and then I cut back word after word after word. I cut it down. The story is about a samurai. It's called A Single Samurai. It's about a samurai who's climbing a kaiju the size of a mountain. It's literally a mountain that just woke up one day in Japan and started walking around and stomping around. And he's by himself, one little dude trying to figure out how to kill it. Right? Cool, fun idea. So here's what I did. I said, okay, if I make this story shorter, then maybe it'll be good enough, but it'll also be small enough to where the editor will say, you know what? This is a good story. It gets in, it gets out quick, and it's small enough to where we can include it pretty much wherever. That story was 4,000 words. It's short.
It's tight.
So there's, apart from just how can you tell like a story in 5,000 words or less or whatever, tell a short story, understand that there's actually some logic and some business decisions when you're doing this.
Yep. And the more experience you get, the more you can actually engineer the story to fit a specific window. Like this last novella I did for Audible, they're paying me a really good rate per word up to 20,000 words. And I turned in a 19,999 word manuscript.
Is this the second one or the first one?
The first one for Lost Planet Homicide. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember this.
So you can write to,
because you gave me the draft of,
and I think it was like 20,005 words.
And so as I was going through and editing, I'm like, oh, you don't need this word. You don't need this word.
But
I was looking at the word count. I'm like, nope. So in other places I would add just a little extra description. So when I turned it back to you, it was the same word count.
Oh, man.
I was like, get every penny, Larry.
Every penny. No. So when you're working in a really short window like that, I find the biggest key is what's pertinent.
Yeah.
And so what has to be there and what is extraneous. And so I like the idea of come in when the action's already started. Yeah. So you're not spending a lot of time before because you don't have room for that. Mm-hmm. And then get out early. The key is on a lot of these is you guys don't have to actually explain the entire thing. People get trapped and they think a short story needs to tell the entire story. But a lot of times a short story is basically you're telling part of a story.
It's just a scene sometimes.
A lot of times it's just a scene. Now, even at 5,000 words, depending on what you do, you could literally have a beginning, middle, and end and tell a guy's whole life story. I did Testimony of Trader Ratul. I think it's only about 5,000 words.
That sounds about right.
Maybe 5 or 6. But that is a guy, and he's just talking. Anybody tells his entire life story like it's a bunch of people sitting around a campfire, basically is what it is. And I did it, and that was kind of a Robert E. Howard thing. He used to do that a lot, or that was the nature of a lot of Robert E. Howard stories.
Well, I mean, think about if someone were to come up to you and say, "Oh, hey, Joe Schmo, tell me about your time." Okay, like so, Vietnam vets, right? Tell me about your time in Vietnam. They're not going to tell you like, well, one day I decided I was going to enlist. No, in general, they're like, dude, this one time I was in a chopper and it went down. Like they start you right there and you're going, oh, or depending on the Vietnam vets, like, well, I was in the jungle one day and I was snapping this dude's neck. Like
or another dude is like, I was in this whorehouse and, depending on the guy.
But to Larry's point, you're starting in the middle of something, in the middle of the action. All that other stuff, it is important in some way, shape, or form, but not this story.
Well, it's interesting because there's like the term is in media res.
Yeah.
Is when the story just kind of begins and stuff's happening, and then you figure out what's going on from that point on. That is not necessarily necessary in a 5,000 word story, but it does actually help because if you are tempted to have like 1,000 words worth of introduction, that's taking up space.
Think about in comedy, Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, I really enjoy that show.
Funny show, right?
I love Terry Crews.
But think about how that show opens every time. The cold open. It's not like it's them like doing paperwork. No. It's always them doing something super weird and zany just to get you in really quick. Because remember, those episodes aren't an hour.
Yeah, no, they're like 20 minutes
after commercials. I think they're 22 to 24 minutes.
Yeah.
That is the equivalent of a short story, right? In film wise. So one of my favorite ones of that show is the one where it's the lineup.
Oh, when they start to sing
Backstreet Boys.
That's fantastic.
And they're just going and there's a purpose to this whole scene, but like you're in the action and the main character is he's like, okay. He's like, all right, do you recognize them? She's like, oh, I'd recognize their voice. He's like, okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to have them start singing. And he hits the button and they start doing the Backstreet Boys. And finally at the end, they're all singing together.
Yeah, and the finally detective joins in.
Yeah, and it's all good. And then at the very end, the girl goes, it's the last one.
Number 5 killed my brother.
Yeah. And the main character goes, oh, dang, I totally forgot what we were doing here. So from a comedic story perspective, I think you can really learn a lot from how to get into a story really quickly through these cold opens that you see in comedy. Seinfeld used to do them a lot. Yep. Great, one of my favorite shows of all time, right? Brooklyn Nine-Nine does it. The Office used to do it quite a bit.
Parks and Rec
did it. What it does is it gets you in there really quick, and it does a couple things. One, it gets you in the middle of a story without having to think. You're just there and you're enjoying already.
Yeah. And it needs to just be kind of clear enough that you can follow along and not get confused. Because remember the whole rule about the bored and the confused? Yeah. That's super dangerous in short because you don't have a lot of extra room to hook them.
No, not at all. The other thing that this does is it makes you care one way or another, whether it's just because you think they're funny or because it's maybe if it's a different genre, it's a little bit more poignant or whatever, or there's murder involved, like you see in horror stuff. It makes you care about the characters. And for me, when I write short fiction, that's the very first thing that I'm thinking of. It's okay. I've got this cool character. I'm going to tell a short story about this cool character doing cool things. How quickly can I make the reader care about this character? Can I do it in the first page? I better. Can I do it because if I can't make anyone care in the first page,
yeah, you're already
then
too
I'm
late.
already host. Can I do it within a paragraph? If I can get you to like feel the stakes already. Now, I'm not saying you have to, want to have that character's babies within the first paragraph, right? Or the first sentence, even better. That's why in short stories, the opening line is such an important line, that hook. But, do you care about them or their predicament within a paragraph? If you do, you're on that track.
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't necessarily have to solve the entire predicament.
No.
You just need to have, in this short story, you need to have some sort of progression. Something needs to happen, something needs to change, something needs to grow or die.
Well, that's usually me.
I mean, actually, you'd be surprised. 5,000 words, you can actually tell a lot of story. In fact, I'm thinking of some. I'm trying to go back, and I was thinking of some of the word counts of some of my stories.
Let me think. The one that you wrote for me, Father's Day. I think that
Father's Day is 5,000 words.
I think it's like, I was gonna say, I think it's like
short.
4 or 4,500.
It's not long.
Yeah.
And that's still okay. So Father's Day, if
No
you've not
action,
read it,
no violence.
no. The most is like
He yells at a guy.
Yeah, there's some yelling. A robot.
Well, that's how it starts.
A robot restrains somebody.
That's how the story starts.
Yep.
Okay, the first line is
the
the very first line, I believe, is you are not taking my daughter.
Yep.
And so think about what that first line does in terms of character development, and in terms of setting the story.
We have a concern. We have a concerned father.
Yeah.
Within the first seconds, we know, and by extension, we know there's a daughter in danger.
Yes.
Boom.
Boom. You're in.
Plus the title's Father's Day.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And actually, one of the best stories I've ever written.
I think so.
And it
I'm
tells,
a little biased, but yeah.
Yeah, you were the editor, but it tells so Trent, find that. It's in Target Rich Environment, Volume 1, I believe.
Is it 1?
Yeah, it's in 1. And yeah, because it's the one that got the 2 horror stories.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because Deadweight's Dreaming is like 10,000 words. It's longer.
Sure.
But actually, read that as an example, because I come in late to the action. I establish stakes fast. And then it's just seeing it through to the resolution. There's almost no action in this thing, but it's actually kind of terrifying. And it's kind of dark. It is a gut punch to every dad ever.
It is. Every single dad everywhere will feel that one.
But it also has a lot of world building in a science fiction post-apocalyptic story.
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing, okay, so it came out in this collection that I edited called Shared Nightmares. I edited it with a mutual acquaintance friend of ours named Nate Shoemate.
Yeah, Nate Shoemate. Good dude.
We edited it together. And and I sold a lot of that anthology at various conventions. And when people come up, after they've read Larry's story, they have this interesting reaction. They're like, dang, Larry. Like, most people, when they read Larry's, they expect rocking adventure, guns blazing, jokes to alleviate the tension and stuff.
No, have some
This story
psychological
has
horror.
none of that. It's actually just word for word, pound for pound word count. Might be the darkest thing you've written.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah. And it's short. So I'd say, Trent, that's a good example. Because I think that one, I pulled that off really well.
All right. When we come back, we're going to continue talking about this. See if we can't, we'll give you some good recommendations, for, we'll call it reference textbooks. You're back in school, Trent. If you pay 99 cents a month, we'll call that your tuition. So, so we'll come back and we'll talk more about this.
A cracking good story idea requires 5 critical elements. Until you have all 5, you'll struggle to plot. You'll write a few scenes and run out of gas. You'll feel like the story isn't going anywhere. And that's because it isn't. It can't. A story won't do what it needs to do without all 5 elements. However, once you have these critical elements, your story will suddenly roar to life. In Create Story Ideas That Beg to Be Written, award-winning author John D. Brown reveals what those 5 elements are and the secrets to developing them. Save yourself years of trying to figure things out on your own. You can develop terrific story ideas on purpose instead of on accident. All you need are some simple, practical insights, and you'll find them in Create Story Ideas That Beg to Be Written. Don't wait another minute. Learn the secrets and become a story idea machine today. Available on Amazon. Pick up your copy today.
And we're back. All right. So let's take it from this angle, Larry. Okay. You've received an invitation to an anthology, or perhaps you see because I'm assuming in Trent's case, he wants to do some short fiction, perhaps as tie into some of his other novels he's written, which is fun.
I do that all the time.
I do as well. I also use short fiction as testing ground for potential big brain ideas.
Several of my things started with a short story as
Yeah.
a test before I wrote the novel.
Exactly.
Oftentimes that would then later become a single scene or a chapter in that book.
Right. Now, the other, so here's what I'm assuming. I'm assuming that he wants to write short stories for one of these reasons, or maybe he just wants to develop the skill, whatever. Because it is an entirely different skill in many ways. So, what are some of the first things that he should be thinking of? Say he sees a query. We're taking, we want fantasy stories that are dark and gritty, and it can't be more than 5,000 words. Go. Yeah. Okay. So say that pitch comes to you. Say I'm the editor, and I'm like, hey, Larry, I need fantasy stories, no more than 5,000 words, dark and gritty.
That's pretty much how this works.
That's
a lot
how
of
it
times too. The theme is something like that. So yeah. So if I'm thinking dark and gritty fantasy story, usually I'll take a walk. I'll take an hour, and I'll just kind of ponder on it. And I'll be like, do I have anything in my? We've talked about idea management before.
Yeah.
In my folder of ideas, in my idea garden,
Yeah.
do I have any things that are images or cool ideas or thoughts or lines or characters sitting out there that fit this gritty, dark fantasy thing?
My idea garden's a cemetery.
Yeah, Steve has the idea cemetery.
Yes.
Actually, that sounds bad. It's like the ideas go to die, but then you have the ghosts.
Yes.
You're a horror
I bring
writer.
them all
I don't know
back.
how you do it. Mine's like an idea armory.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
But I'll go through and I'll think, okay, do I have anything already that is something I want to write? And then I kind of brainstorm.
Yeah.
And if I don't have anything in the idea garden that fits about that, I mean, oftentimes, like I said, the more you do this, the more practice you get coming up with ideas, the easier it is because you've trained your brain. I'll go wander around for an hour or two, and I'll go for a drive, and I'll just think about it, and I'll be like, oh, wow, actually, this would be kind of cool to play with this kind of thing. And then I'm going to fit it to that theme. I'm going to make sure that anytime you're writing for somebody's anthology, you always want to kind of aim to really, hit it. I'm going to write that story. And my thing is, when I'm looking at the 5,000 words, I don't really, I'm an outliner, but I don't really outline 5,000 word stories. It's not worth it. 5,000 word story I can write in a day or two.
Yeah.
Usually. If I spend 3 days on it, I've probably spent too much time.
Sure.
If I've spent 4 days on it, I've definitely spent too much time. But I want to get in fast. I want to make sure I hit those themes. I don't need to resolve everything, but I need to resolve something.
Sure.
Even if it's just a character realization or the character changes somehow or grows somehow. Like, I can introduce a big, evil, bad monster in this gritty fantasy. I don't have to kill it in 5,000 words.
No.
I can. You'd be surprised what you can kill in 5,000 words. You can kill a lot of stuff.
I know.
Yeah. But that's how I'd come at it. That would be my process, really.
For me, I'm very similar in that regard. My first thing is always, okay, do I already have something? Look, we're all authors. We have a million things that we have like partially started, or an idea on a paper that we've written down saying, hey, at some point, write a story about this. This is kind of neat. So the first thing I do is I check that. I'm like, okay, do I have any cool ideas? At that point, I start thinking in theme. And then I think, all right, if all the stories in this collection are going to be, okay. We talked about my giant kaiju story, right? I wrote one immediately, almost after that. The publisher that forgot about me felt bad, came back to me, and they had me write a giant robot story.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, we want to do a giant robot story. There's going to be like 25 authors in it. I'm thinking, okay, okay, that's a huge anthology.
It's also going to be really hard not to write a story similar to somebody else with that many authors.
Exactly. And that was my first thought. And it had some fairly big names in it. I mean, Kevin J. Anderson was in it.
Yeah.
Julie Lanai
I
was
remember
in it.
that one.
Yeah, Mech, right?
Yep.
It's called Mech Ages Steel. That publisher doesn't exist anymore. Anyway, I remember thinking about it and going, well, crap, what do I do? What do I do to turn this into a Steve Diamond story? I remember a Joe Lansdale quote where he says, like, look, I don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to write a Western today, or I'm going to write a horror story today, or I'm going to write crime. He's like, I wake up and say, okay, what's the best Joe Lansdale story I can tell today?
I love that.
Fantastic, right? And that should be everyone's goal, right? To write the story that only you can write because of your own voice. Okay. And so that was on my brain. I thought, okay, well, I'm a horror guy. What can I do with giant rock'em sock'em robots and turn it into horror? And I was going over this. I was struggling hard, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I brainstormed with a buddy, and he just said one line. He's like, well, what if because my initial thought was, okay, I wrote a story about a giant kaiju. So I feel like I should write a story about a giant robot just for symmetry's sake. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a story about a robot that's the size of a city. They're mobile cities. Because why? Well, because if you're a giant city that's stationary, a giant kaiju is just going to run roughshod all over you, right? So they have to be mobile. Cool idea. I'm like, all right, yeah, all right. But how do I make it different now? And it was Dan Wells. Okay, he said, well, what if the city starts turning against, or what if the robot starts turning against the stuff inside of it, the people in it? I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. I know what to do with this now. And this is the story that I lovingly refer to as Pacific Rim meets single white female.
Yep, it's a stalker.
The robot starts stalking a girl that lives inside of it. And it's complete. I mean, it's basically 90% of it is just a horror story. So you never know where these ideas are going to come from. But for me, that's one of my first things. It's, okay, what kind of cool characters can I have? How can I get into this action really quick? How can I make sure that it feels like a me story?
Yeah. That's a key. It's like, that's why I like the Lonsdale quote, because anything I write like across a whole bunch of different genres, but they're always Larry Correia stories. Sure. And though, like I said, it's like some can be very different, but they're all my story.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of a 5,000 word dark fantasy story. I did the one, I don't know if you read this one, because it came out in a CKP anthology, Tales of Valor. It's not in any of my collections yet because it's newer. And so what it is
this one.
The story's called The Dregs. I want to say it's about 7,000 words, but I easily could have got it down to 5,000 if I wanted to, just because I put quite a bit of action in it. And
sure.
But on that one, they needed basically a hero, like a dark fantasy hero story. So many years, and that one I was trying to think of something, and many years ago, I thought of a Louis L'Amour Western story I had read that had stuck with me over the years, where basically this guy who's kind of the town drunk wakes up in town in this little Western frontier town, and everyone's gone. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of a mystery as he's trying to figure out why everybody's gone. And then it turns out the town's actually under threat, and then he tries to defend it. So I actually I did 3 characters. One who just kind of wanders into town when this is going down, one who is the town drunk who wakes up and everybody's gone, and one is the guy they left in a jail cell.
Sure.
As this fantasy town on the frontier is under threat. But the thing is, and so it was a simple idea, starting with like a Louis L'Amour story I'd read when I was a kid.
I think that's important. The simple idea.
Simple idea, so doesn't need to be complicated. However, this is an interesting thing. As I wrote this, because once again, I don't outline short stories. I have a paragraph.
Sure.
And so I had the basic idea as I'm going through and I'm doing this, actually developed a rather extensive backstory for one of the main characters where he was the deposed, and it turns out at the end, he was the deposed and fallen king of this kingdom. So he was a fur trapper who lived out in the middle of nowhere now because he's supposed to be dead because he was the mad tyrant king who got ran out of power. So the guy is actually a bad mamba jamba. And the only reason how I established all this is I decided there was going to be a piano in this frontier town. And
you're in frontier town.
And then it turns out at the end that this guy can just play like a classical master because he learned, in the imperial palace as a child.
Sure. Yeah.
But it just had that little extra thing I think really bumped the story up. But yet it was really short. So it started with a simple idea, but by giving myself that opportunity, once again, discovery. Yeah. By giving myself a chance and some room to work in this very short thing, I came up with actually something that was a much more interesting and intricate story than the very basic idea I started with.
Yeah, for all the Trents out there, who are thinking about this. You know, a lot of what Larry and I are talking about is just what we've done in the past, the experiences we've had, and that's because that's how we learn.
Well, I would say one of my recommendations, and you probably agree with me, Steve, is pick some anthologies.
Yep, that's exactly
that you
where I was gonna
enjoy.
go. Yep.
And pick an anthology you enjoy, because most of those stories in most anthologies are going to be 5 to 7 to 10,000 words. So
yeah, in general, most anthology calls that you will see, they say 5,000 words or less for the mere mortals. Look, if Larry's putting together an anthology and Jim Butcher's like, "Hey Larry, I want to be in this, but I want to write a 15,000 word story," we're gonna say, "Yeah."
Well, I think my last one, like David Weber, was like, "Hey, my story is like 12,000 words." I'm like, "That's great."
Yeah, sure, whatever. Dude.
Yeah, right. Thanks,
Yes, sir, David Weber, sir.
All right. I think Jim's was long, but I was like, "Okay, Jim, you're
and
sure."
that's I remember that's why I was a little surprised when for the first Noir Fatale anthology, I get the contract and I look at it and it's like 8 to 10,000 words. Like, what?
Yeah.
Okay.
We give you guys room to work.
I'm like, dang, I can basically tell an entire story in here.
Yeah.
Like,
You guys go a
at
little
5,000, I go short. At 10,000,
you got a little more room.
oh man, you got plenty of wiggle
Plus,
room.
with us telling noir stories, noir tends. I find that it's harder to get in and out and fast with noir, because noir, it's a lot of tone setting and mood.
Yep, and it's hard to do that in a short amount of time.
So most of the stories me and Casey took in were like 7,000-8,000 range, probably.
Right. Yeah, mine was exactly 10,000.
Yeah, I mean, you got room to work with it. So I don't know, Trent. That was the thing, is like, go back and think of your favorite anthologies, like stories that really, like hit the right buttons for you. Go reread those stories, and honestly, they're going to be pretty close to your word count. Or if not, think, well, how could I, trim 10% off this story if I needed to?
Easy.
Pretty easy, usually, just to say what parts are the least important.
Yeah. Now, the great news for you, Trent, is these days there is no shortage of anthologies out there.
There's a lot of really good ones.
And because of Kickstarter being what it is, abhor the company, but whatever. There are so many great anthologies coming out right now. I mean, shoot, Larry's got 2 by himself.
Yeah.
Your Target Rich Environment 1 and 2.
Yep. And then,
with a 3 at some point coming.
And then Noir Fatale, and number 3 should be coming, and then Noir Fatale, and then No Game for Knights.
Yep. If you're a Monster Hunter fan, you can pick up the Monster Hunter files, and that actually, Trent, might give you some interesting perspectives, and not just you, Trent. Sorry, I'm singling you out.
Well, but if you've read the Monster Hunter series, you just pick up the Monster Hunter files and then check that out and see.
Yeah.
And those stories are wildly divergent too.
Yeah. But what I think is interesting about that is it might also give you an idea of not just telling a short story within a certain word count framework, but also how do you engage an audience that already has preconceived notions and stuff like that. I mean, Larry's Monster Hunter series has been around, for a while now. And so how are these same authors able to tell stories in Larry's universe with small word counts?
Yep.
Okay. What you'll find is a lot of the same skills apply.
Well, and also, if you are going to write short stories based upon your longer stories, your novels, in order to promote the novels, a lot of times people will do a short story.
People are doing that.
Well, Bayan loves to do that. Whenever we do a novel, they'll be like, "Do you want to do a short story about this novel or in this universe that we will put for free on the Bayan website when your book comes out?"
Well, and the short story I have in Noir Fatale, that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a prequel to our Servants of War.
Yep, it's Christoph's origin story.
Yeah.
Which was like, it was a very tight story, even at 10,000 words, but you told a lot of world building in that.
Yeah.
But you could have did that in 5 if you needed to.
Probably. I don't think it would have been as good.
No, that story needed to be longer.
Yeah.
You needed room.
I also think that you can learn a lot in terms of quick, punchy stories by reading kind of what we've been talking about, noir stuff, some old noir stuff. Read some Chandler, read some Dashiell Hammett.
I actually really like, there was a collection, Hollywood Hills or something, Murder in the Hollywood, but it's Louis L'Amour's noir detective collection. Yeah. Because people don't think of him as a noir author. They think of,
they think of the Westerns.
Yeah, they think of the Westerns, but they think of, Chandler and Hammett. But I actually love that anthology. Mm-hmm. If you can find, it should be free on the internet at this point. If you can find that, grab that, read it. But it is a masterful collection of in, out, fast, boom.
Well, and to that nature, even all these authors, the Louis L'Amours, Hammett's, all that, your some of your old Robert E. Howard stuff, your old pulp
Love
novels.
Robert E. Howard.
When we say pulp novels, those novels were like 35,000 words.
The Great
to 40.
Gatsby's 47,000 words.
Yeah, but it's not pulpy,
It's
nor
turgid.
punchy, nor good.
I could trim that book down to 5,000 words.
I know. It's a good thing we don't have to study it for 3 months.
Oh,
wait.
we were going to talk about that. I'm currently at war with my school district over this. So
there are so many great pieces of shorter fiction. The one I always recommend is the I Am Legend collection by Richard Matheson, because it has personally my personal favorite piece of short fiction ever written, the titular I Am Legend. But it also has a lot of really cool other small short stories in it. Matheson was amazing.
Well, to be fair, I've talked a lot. I mean, I can't stand Stephen King, and just this day, I mean, as a person, as a writer, he's actually pretty talented.
Well, his short fiction is pretty dang good.
That's what I say. His short fiction is far better than his long fiction. So actually, I would recommend some of Stephen King's short fiction collections.
Oh yeah.
His long fiction, he really sucks at sticking an ending. And also, I yelled at him today on Twitter. It was funny as heck. I just took him apart. It went viral.
Yeah.
Well, we won't get into that. But his short fiction is actually rather brilliant. And it's once again, it's in, out, tells a story, doesn't resolve stuff necessarily, but it's wordsmithed very tightly.
Yeah. So, Trent, to your point, and to anyone else who has a similar question, I think the biggest thing that you're going to need to do for this is just practice it.
Yep.
I think the best writing exercise, I suppose. You know what? I do have a good writing exercise for this. I once wrote a story, and I think maybe I've talked about this before. I went to this. It was this like weird impromptu kind of sort of writing group thing. I only knew like 3 people there, and there were like 15 or 20 people there. But the whole idea was, okay, you would get there, and we're going to give you just a small, quick topic. And all you have to do is write a short story about that topic in 1 hour. Okay. Now, that short story in an hour, I mean, think about how fast you can type in word count. So for me, that's 1,000 to 1,500 words.
Yeah. And I would say, you don't have to beat yourself up on the editing or making it perfect.
Well, and that was the thing. It was like, don't worry about it. Your goal is to get in, get out, and throw that story on the piece of paper. So now the topic I ended up, it was just a series of columns of words, like a noun and some sort of descriptive word. And I had haunted baby monitor is what I ended up with. Now, I just happened to have had my first kid at that point, my wife and I, and we were both exhausted. And I'm like, well, I know what to do with this.
Oh yeah.
And so I wrote,
you can do all sorts of creepy stuff.
So I wrote a story called Hush, which is in my Hellhounds Dream Anthology. And it's an anthology and it's a story that every woman who reads it immediately hates me for a little bit, because it's intentionally manipulative, but it's 1,500 words, and I tell a complete story in 1,500 words.
I think that's our homework assignment.
It's a great exercise. I've recommended this to writing groups before. And every time I give it to them, they come back and they're like, dude, that was actually really interesting and helpful, because you're on a timer. As long as you don't like stress out too hard about it, you just take it as what it is, an exercise, and you go. Your brain the brain is an amazing, amazing tool. And so once you set it to a task and it's going, you just start clacking away at that keyboard and you tell that story. You get in as quick as you can. Only the essential words matter. Only the essential details matter. You're in, you're out, and you're done. And after an hour, you're it. So what do you think, Larry? Think that's a decent assignment?
I think give yourself 1 hour and go for it.
Yeah.
See what you can do. I think that's a great assignment for everybody.
Now, if at the end of the hour, you're not quite done with your story, that's okay. Like, it's not like we're going to go all Stasi on you or anything.
We're not her.
No, we're not her.
We're not president of SIFLA.
Right. So that's okay though. But once you get to that point, say the hour's done, look at that story and go, how much time would it actually take me to complete this? Maybe it's only 15 minutes. Maybe it's only half hour. Complete it. finish it
If it is an awesome story, there you go. Later on, you'll put it in your collection like Steve did.
like I did. Super random. So anyway, hopefully that answered your question, Trent. Look, as always, everyone, if you have questions like this, that was a fantastic question that led us to a lot of nuts and bolts answers, and really had us think in different ways here too. So if you have any more questions like that, just throw them our way. We're good. We'll answer them as best we can. All right. So that's it. That's all the time we have for you today. We'll catch you on the next one.
WriterDojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder and Bear and Hare Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nivo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on the Writer Dojo, email ads@writerdojo.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
They can give us $100 million first, then Joe Rogan.
No, I'll take that.